Welcome to Midday Repartee. Let me get rid of this screen here. Made a little mistake. I usually get rid of that before the video ends. Hail the chat. Thanks everyone that is here already. If you can, share out the video. That would be great. We're going to have a really interesting discussion today on why aren't Americans reading American comic books? And can we do anything about it? I want to welcome my co-host today, Scotland's greatest shit superhero, Captain
I'll
Fuckhead.
never get tired of hearing that.
What is the second part of that?
Scotland's best shit superhero and CG's best shit artist.
Yes, okay. I got to get that in there in future shows. How are you doing?
I am good. I've been painting today, and now I'm flatting. I'm doing a little bit of flatting on Xenotype just to keep Scotsman happy.
Nice. We are also joined today by Mitchell. How are you?
Doing good. I have a question about the subject. Are we talking about not reading the words on the page, or just not actually picking up the book?
I'm just, like, why, just pure number of copies sold, like in terms of, in relation to the population of the country, what is that? Why aren't more people reading comic books? And we're gonna, we'll compare it to what goes on in Japan with manga, because there's a huge difference there, and
Yes.
we can get into like what we can do differently. Is there a way to change that and improve the numbers, or is it just on a downward slide, and that's just the way it's going to be? I don't think so. I guess the best thing to do would just be to start with some numbers, so just to put it in perspective. So I looked up what the top selling comic was, most recently tracked, and it's this Star Wars #1. All said and done, it was like 600,000 copies, and this was even going to overseas, just 574,000 copies in the U.S. So I'm just going to be, if we're really generous, let's just say maybe there's 1 million comic book readers in the country, and obviously this isn't exact, but we've got a population of 328 million, and if we do the math on that, what we get here is 0.3% of the population are engaging comic books in the U.S. in terms of American comic books. That is a tiny figure, And I'm just like, what are your thoughts on that, Captain Fuckhead? Like, in terms of that percentage?
I think America has always had a very difficult relationship with comic books anyway, to be honest. You go back to, was it the 60s, where the 50s, late 50s, early 60s, where they were getting attacked by the comics code and all that sort of stuff, and comics were taken away from children because they were seen as childish.
Right.
I think with what's going on in comics at the moment, I think, to be honest, you're back in that position again. If you look at some of the comics, the reason why a lot of comics aren't selling is because they're shit.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Like, if they were any good, people would read them. And if you look at what is happening to DC and to Marvel, particularly Marvel, I think are the worst for it. It's back to that point where we're gonna make shit books. You know what? Because shit people read them.
Right.
Honestly, that's how I feel about it.
It's awful.
I liked the word. I used it accidentally the other day, but I'm going to stick to it. I think the woke tards are doing it on purpose.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, it certainly seems that way. And, they're trying to create these, it seems like they're really pushing like young adult comics, or trying to produce young adult comics. And it's like, kids they don't really want to engage things that are made for them, that, and they're usually condescending. It's usually written by people who have no understanding of what it's like to be in their age group, in their time and place. So it just doesn't work. It comes off as completely absurd. Kids, I think, want to read. They want to read the adult comic. They want. That's what is cool about it. Is that, it's maybe something you shouldn't be reading. A little bit of that. I'm not saying it needs to be depraved or just ridiculously over the top violence or anything, but they don't want something that's speaking down to them. I think they want something that is above them, that they're reaching up to, because it's like, it's a little bit edgy. So I think that's part of the problem. Of course, all the woke stuff is happening, but I don't know. It seems like there's a deeper cultural thing that is kind of a barrier when it comes to Americans reading comics.
Yeah, that's why I was touching on what happened before about the attack on comics and the I can't think of the word, degradation of those who read them. Is that the right word I'm thinking of? I don't know. It begins with D and it ends in a nation. They say the comic books are only read by those who are immature. They're read by basement dwellers. And even if you look at what's again, Marvel and DC, they rely on basement dwellers, as they would describe them, to support their industry while they go off looking for other markets to exploit and forgetting about the people that they depend on.
Yeah, right.
And
it's
I brought
so bizarre.
I brought this up the other day, but the kids' superheroes today live on Instagram.
Right.
And that's the other
yeah,
issue.
you did. You brought that up. That's an interesting point.
Because you could bring games into that equation and say, well, what a kid may feel more engaged in a story in a computer game, but I see computer games as comics as kind of the same thing. They're a visual entertainment medium. One happens to be made of. They're both made of steels.
Yeah.
It's just I think the difference now with video games is that you can play online and talk to people at the same time. When you're in a comic, when you're reading a book, you don't want to be talking to anyone. You want to be reading your fucking book.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And I mean, I think Scotsman has touched on this on a previous show, but it's kind of like, is it just, the young generations coming up, they're just not going to have an interest in printed comic books? Is it just not, they're just not going to get there no matter what you try to do? Is it just something that is had its heyday and is now going to slowly decline until all of us who love them are dead and gone? I mean, is that what's happening, or is there something to be done?
I think that there's a little bit. It's not quite as bad as you're making it sound necessarily. A lot of the people that I know that read comics, they don't have like a pull list. They don't go to the comic store weekly. They go and they track down old trades, and they go and they track down the cheap old issues. So you don't really see them when you go and you get like the numbers from Diamond buying stuff, and you talk to them. They're still knowledgeable. They still like the medium, but they realize, like Captain Fuckhead was kind of saying earlier, that they're not writing good books now.
Yeah.
So if we could fix that, that can also bring people into the comic book stores. Another thing that limits us is that they are pretty much uniquely sold in kind of like specialty stores or an afterthought in another location. Like Barnes & Noble carries like DC and Marvel and I think Dynamite or something like that. But they're like just shoved on a magazine rack, and you could glance at that rack and they don't stick out. You don't really see them.
Yeah.
So like we need something to at least say that they're there. And another thing that I've seen is like the younger guys that I talk to all do digital. It's cheaper and they don't have to worry about storing it. It's just might be changing.
That's and I guess, it's hard for me to, I just don't have an interest in the digital aspect of reading a comic myself. That doesn't feel enjoyable to me. But, again, the people that have been born into a digital world, where they live on the screen and that's all they've really known. I mean, they're probably not going to have that sentiment necessarily. So maybe digital comics is going to be the thing. and that's just the way it's going to be. I don't know. And maybe they'll, I remember quite some time ago hearing about them working on possibly having some kind of digital paper, or like a comic book that looks like a comic book and is read like a physical comic book, but you can literally load the comic onto it and read it, and then you can load another one in. So it's like, I don't know where that tech is at, if it's even possible. That might be something that happens in the future as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know about the digital thing. For me, comics are a printed medium. They're meant to be held and enjoyed that way, but that's probably an attitude that is dying out.
There's only a few books that I would really want printed. Like, I have no problem getting the books that I've been getting since I was growing up printed still, but it's harder and harder to try to want to pick up a new, series printed when you can get a lot of them, at least that stuff that's coming out in the stores, through, Comixology, or you could wait till they're on sale on eBay or something like that. You don't have to get them brand new.
Yeah. This is something I've asked before on this show, I think, from Kucky here, is, why haven't the movies put out more of a call to action with the comics? It just seemed like such a no-brainer.
Are we talking about Marvel here?
Yeah, and even any of the comic book movies, Marvel, DC, doesn't matter. Like, why aren't they're not promoting people to go out and buy comics, a direct call to action? Yeah, the whole movie is a comic book based movie, but that doesn't, why not have a call to action to go get these characters in their original form? I think that could have helped.
My only problem with that, in terms of particularly looking at Marvel, the last good Marvel film that I watched was Iron Man 1.
Well, I think that the problem is that even if they did do that call to action, if the comic book, if you expect to go see Iron Man and then go pick up Iron Man and it's like Riri Williams, or it's not Iron Man, or even Pepper Potts, I think was Iron Man for a hot second. All these different kind of little twists. You're gonna pick it up and go, oh no, I don't want to spend $4 on this. Yeah. I thought I was getting this cool Tony Stark book, but
yeah, that was that disconnect again, and we've talked about that before. It's like, why you have these huge bombastic movies that spanning a decade of all this, character building and story building, and the people that did just take it upon themselves to seek out the comics, found that what was on the screen was not in the books, and so complete disconnect.
And I feel like they did drive people to comics, because there's a lot of people that I know nowadays that weren't reading comics when I was in high school and junior high that are reading comics now, but they're not going to the local comic book shop and buying it. They're going to Amazon and they're going to say, oh man, I want that. I heard that this arc was good. I'm going to go buy that trade.
Okay.
They're not going in there and really supporting our local stores, but they're buying print and they're just buying the old stories.
Yeah. So you think the films did generate some interest in comics?
Yes. I just think that it didn't generate enough interest in getting people into buying the new product. I think that it just meant people were going through the backlogs and this story's, everyone talks about this story being really good online. I'll buy this story and check it out too.
Yeah.
I wouldn't disagree with that in any way whatsoever. I've gone out and bought some old 80s and some before that, old Iron Man stories and stuff like that before. But I buy a lot of comics on Amazon if I'm looking at certain non-Comicsgate projects.
How dare you?
Well, I don't live. My LCS is 50 miles away. I'm not getting on a bus for 3 hours just to get, and then 4 hours to get there and back just to go and buy a book.
Yeah,
no dedication.
Well, they are on. They're online, so it's an advantage, and they're decent when it comes to delivering from online. But some stuff you just can't get in an LCS anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
I have to go to Amazon. I don't have the choice. I won't go to Comixology because I want the fucking book.
Yeah.
This is such a huge part of this conversation, I think, this comparison. So I'm gonna do the same thing with Japan and manga. If we look at the top selling book over there, Demon Slayer, it was over 12 million copies sold.
Yeah.
And then you have a population of 126 million. So when you do the math on that, it's nearly 10%. 10% of the population is engaging that art form there. And I think the obvious answer there is it's so built into the culture. And it's like you were saying, Fuckhead, it's not looked on as, a basement dweller thing. I mean, as I understand it, people are reading manga everywhere they go, out in public. It's not something that people look down on. It's built into the culture. It's respectable.
You could find it easy. You could find it 1,000 times easier than finding an American comic book.
Yes.
And
Right.
you can find it more consistently.
And
That book is everywhere.
When you look at anime and manga, they are entirely related to the comic. To their books. They are not. They're not bastardized like we were talking about with Marvel a second ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, even I can't remember what the name of the square is, but there's a square in Tokyo. So when I was growing up, Sundays for me was skateboarding day. Everyone goes and meets in the square and then does whatever we do in the city for 8 hours. But there's a square in Tokyo where people meet up at 10 o'clock in the morning just to spend the day cosplaying. Every single Sunday.
Wow, that's cool. Damn.
And each little sort of cosplay clique has its own little area where they meet up, and then they go around looking at each other. It's a weird thing from a Western perspective, but it's been in Japanese culture for a very, very long time. And actually, if you look at how manga and anime and all that sort of stuff developed, it developed after an American influence of particularly American comics coming to Japan, which filtered into their culture. Because if you look at Japanese culture now, it's a really weird place because they still have a lot of the traditional values of Japanese culture, like the idea of the nail that gets hammered out, the nail that stands out gets hammered down. Those kind of traditional ideologies are still there, but it's been so heavily influenced by Western culture, particularly American pop culture, which is the way I should put it, that it's become this completely new entity. The last, let's call it 3 generations of Japanese kids, they have exclusively created this thing.
Yeah.
Which has now fed into Japanese, which has taken over Japanese pop culture. For fuck me, you can go into a shop in Japan just to go and sit down and give a cat a cuddle.
Right.
Like you look at it from a Western perspective, it's an entirely different thing. It's a weird thing, but it's great. I love it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the younger Japanese celebrate oddities. That's the way I should put it.
Most definitely. Yeah. And I think this is a great point too, is, the same team all across the run. I think that is a huge problem with American comics, is this constant shuffling of talent, moving people around. They're not given enough time to really get into a rhythm with a book or a set of characters.
Yeah.
And I see that as a huge problem.
Mm-hmm. I think that what I'm going to horribly butcher that name. Noah Sadebot said earlier about it being like kind of lining up with, or I think it was him that was lining up with the anime. I might have gotten the name wrong. I'm sorry if I did. For who said that earlier about it just lining up, it all being uniform. So if I go and I would start watching the anime, I can go pick up the book, and the book's gonna be slightly different, but it's gonna be the same story with the same characters, and
Yes.
they're not gonna be changed. They're gonna have the same similar kind of designs. There's a little bit of differences between them, but those just make reading them both good because you can point out the differences. You feel like you get a little bit of a more full story.
Right.
But
and it's like this, Marvel, this was already succeeding in Japan, well before the Marvel cinematic universe hit. They could see what worked. There was a model right in front of them for how to do this correctly. And they just said, nah, let's not do that. Let's confuse the hell out of people by making the books completely different than the movies they're seeing. Let's, completely create a division. Like, I don't know. It just makes zero sense. I'm, you know, I'm just starting to think these people are incompetent, and there's not a conspiracy, there's not some big plan or plot to do anything. They're just incompetent fuckers.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I just think that they're too arrogant. I don't know. I feel like they felt like they got to Marvel. Marvel's one of the biggest names out there, and they're like, we're here for a reason because I'm good. And you know, I think that you can't go and look at it like that. You have to look around. Like, I'm sure that EBS is definitely one of the top guys in Comicscape, but I don't think he's not looking around and seeing what else is going on. If he sees like, oh, people really like doing this, I should try to do a Cyberfrog one of those too. He doesn't just get up there and rest.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it seems to me that clearly moving forward, if we want there to be a strong readership of American comics in America, it's got to be cooked into the culture at the ground level. It's got to be introduced. It's got to be available everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's got to be something that people just accept and respect as part of the cultural entertainment landscape. It's not something where you're spotted reading a comic on a park bench and that people are like, ooh, you're a grown man. What the hell are you doing? So it's got to start early. It's got to be cooked right into the culture, and how do you do that? How is that possible?
Yeah. And also I feel like you also have to present the culture, like the fandom of comics, in a little bit better light than they have been. Like when you go on and we have people that will voice a critique of a book, and you just start calling them all sorts of ists and phobes and everything. It doesn't make people want to support that medium because you're saying your fan base is this, and that doesn't help you either. You're making your whole organization look bad because, well, these guys buy your book every month and you're calling them all these bad things. I don't want to buy a book that's bought by a bunch of those things.
Yeah.
You can't. You have to watch who you're insulting.
Like that's a really weird thing for the state of comic books now. Like I mentioned what happened in the 50s, 60s earlier on, but if you look at, but that wasn't the comic book industry attacking the comic book industry, whereas now that is exactly what's happening. There is the morals are coming from inside the industry.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's baffling. I don't understand. I can't get my head around how this is happening.
Yeah, and to drive away, they're driving away the best talent. They're pulling in people who really aren't qualified to be making the comics at all.
They're driving away the damn customers. That's the fucking weirdest part of the whole thing.
Sure.
Like you can drive away talent all year long because there's talents ten a penny. It's it's not an expensive thing to hire new people, and it's not difficult to find people that are good. What's difficult is retaining customers.
Yeah, good point. I mean, yeah, there is a lot of talent out there, but when you treat the talent a certain way for a certain amount of time, I think it just becomes an unappealing industry to work for. Where they're going to take their talent elsewhere. So I think it does have an impact for sure.
Well, it definitely does in talent, but I mean, if you just look at the people who are in Comicsgate, there's more talent in Comicsgate than there is in Marvel and DC put together.
I would agree with that. I mean,
I think that another thing when you look at too is not just the talent, but how much disposable income people have for some of this stuff. Even though our product is cheaper than like a collected graphic novel, I think like manga volumes are going for like $12 now, something like that, $13. But you don't see them with variant covers. You don't see them relaunching. You don't see them with all this stuff. No, that number one is number one. You bought you paid $13. You have issue number one. You don't need to go and buy another issue number one for a variant cover or anything like that. You have it. Yeah. It's so much easier than when you sit there and you go to the shelf and if you want to collect everything, you want to be a collector, which is why people would buy a lot of that, like the actual collected volumes, I imagine.
Yeah.
You go through and you have to okay, well. Like Power Rangers has 4 books coming out, and there's only actually 2 because they each have a variant cover, and then there's a special mystery variant cover if you order enough of them, right?
Right.
Like, how much money do you think you're going to be able to get everyone to buy? And I feel like that's something that they do right, where they just say, "This is the book. Buy the book."
Agreed.
I
It
actually think that's
absolutely has to. It has to get back to that. It needs to be there because, and it's really it's just abusive to the retailers. I mean, and this has been talked about a lot, of course, over the years in Comicsgate. It's just a total abuse of the retailers, the way they've been doing and producing comics. And
we were we were
forcing them to buy ridiculous amounts of copies just to get a single variant. It's just trash.
Hmm.
we were talking a little bit about this at CG UK the other day. About shit, where was I going? About disposable income and who's got it. And we have a thing or a phrase over here we call the pink pound. And if you think about all the ists and all the phobes that we all get called, the reason why that happens is because they are chasing what we would call the pink pound. Because the people that have the disposable income are those that don't necessarily have families.
Oh, right. That's
So,
interesting.
yeah, well, I mean, that's just, I mean, it's pretty basic, simple maths, really.
Yeah.
Because those who have no families, they tend to have more disposable income. Therefore, that's the people that you chase.
Yeah.
Because those are the
Yeah.
people you want as customers, because they'll spend more money than anybody else. And like I was saying earlier on, the basement dwellers, as they like to call us, those are the people that maybe don't have so much disposable income.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certainly when it comes to traditional comic book buyers like yourselves, I wouldn't call myself a traditional because I didn't buy them years ago. But if you've got kids, you might buy a few books, but you're not likely to buy them for you.
Right. I think Kucky makes a really good point here, and I've thought about this too. Is Marvel too scared of another Image as they lost money when Image happened. They have crippled all their talent in order to prevent it happening again. And I think a lot of that crippling is mental. I don't think Marvel and DC really want or allow their artists to become rock stars. They don't want that because this day and age, when you can go off on your own and produce a comic and crowdfund it, they don't want them getting it in their head that they are the star of the show. They want them to believe that it's Batman is the star and you're just the lucky ass person who gets to work on Batman. They don't want the artist to feel like the rock star. And I think that's very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You just you can see that with what they're doing with what is it, Phase 4 or Phase 79 with the Marvel films. I can't remember where we are. They're phasing all the people that cost the money out. Like they're all dying. All the big actors that sold the films to everybody in the first place gone. They're replacing them with nobody characters and nobody actors that the fans like you and I just don't care anymore.
Right. Welcome to the show, J Money.
Hello, gentlemen.
How you doing?
I'm
So how do
good.
you feel about the situation, dude? Just abysmal readership of American comics in this country. I mean, it's 0.3%, and that's probably I was really generous with the numbers, I think. It's probably lower. So we don't even have 1% of the population reading comics.
Yeah, and then I think Ethan was making jokes the other day about there's not even 227,000 people who buy comic books on one of his streams. I personally, so back in the day, Disney bought all of Marvel's catalog for $50 million, and they were able to turn around that money times 20 or 30 fold over with just the first Iron Man film.
Yeah,
And
insane.
yeah, they're IP grabbers, all of them. And
Mhm.
they, we all know Disney, they're awful. I mean, has anyone watched a single one of the Disney live action films?
I have stayed away from those
They're
like the plague,
scary
man.
looking. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
I don't
just
know.
no
Ooh.
interest.
Yeah, no, exactly, no interest in, no interest in Star Wars, and I didn't watch Captain Marvel. These Phase 4.
never
I'm not
did.
getting Disney Plus. These Phase 4 movies look awful. I hate Angelina Jolie. Why would you give her the main role in the Eternals? And the whole entire cast of the Eternals looks like pure garbage. And I don't
I
know
didn't
what
even
season
know
one.
that. I wasn't aware of that. I really just kind of stopped keeping up on that kind of news.
Yeah,
I'm just
Yeah.
lost
they
interest.
they are making. It has to be something to do with intellectual property rights, because I know Byrne has his family's trust has to have a lot at stake with what's been going on, and maybe that's why they're doing the female Iron Man, and they're bringing in the female Siri to be Black Panther. Like there has to be some underlying uh, corporate shenanigans going on that is the reason why they're doing all this stuff. Because I don't understand why in the world Kevin Feige would. One thing I know about Kevin Feige and watching him during his interviews, you do not push back against Kevin Feige. And he
Right.
makes, if you pay attention to his interviews, you kind of get that feeling.
Sure.
And I don't know what they were thinking at all with this Phase 4 lineup. And I forget what stream we're watching. It was that cartoon that person did with Cecil and Ethan, how they were going back and forth. And
Oh, yeah,
Cecil was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Kami Mark and someone else just like, when the movies were coming out, why didn't the comics correlate to what was happening in the movies?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know. This doesn't make any
Yeah,
sense.
we were hitting on that earlier. It's completely baffling, and they already had a model for what works with anime in Japan. It's like this is how you build a loyal audience and get people really invested in your characters and worlds. It's not like they were going into uncharted territory. It just made a complete mess of it. God.
Well, you could look not just in anime. I mean, you could look around in all types of merchandising. When they do the stuff like my first like gut reaction, like go look at Spaceballs when they're saying, merchandising, put the picture's name on everything. They go and they put the picture's name and they put the logo. It's the same stuff. They don't go and they don't change it. Like when they put out the yogurt doll, they didn't change yogurt. They just put out the yogurt doll. This is the yogurt doll, right?
Right.
Here they're changing it. It's like this is this, it's Spaceballs, the lunchbox, and you pick it up and it's like My Little Pony on it. Like that's not from Spaceballs.
Exactly.
And that's the same kind of thing that they did there, was that they're advertising, Tony Stark, Iron Man, Captain America, all this stuff. And then you go into the comic book store and Captain America is not really the Captain America you saw in the film, and Tony Stark's missing. Yeah.
Complete
They're
insanity.
making movies and using intellectual properties that no one wants. And I don't know. There's something very mysterious. It's like they can't fire Kennedy from Lucasfilm. How? She literally cost that franchise over $1 billion, and they keep her. And then they have her executive producing new material. Like how? How, man? I don't understand.
That's a good point, but you don't need to merge the stories so much as not get rid of Tony Stark. Tony Stark
right.
was in the comic book long before that movie came out. All you needed to do is just leave Tony Stark. He'd be off doing his own adventure. But you go in to read, Tony Stark got you to go in to get that book. You pick it up. Oh, it's Tony Stark. What's he doing? Oh, he's doing something else cool. Even if he's not fighting the same bad guy.
Yeah.
And remember, because Tony Stark gets about $50 million per film. And then on top of that, he has one of the most prestigious contracts you can have for Disney. And and then on top of that, he gets a percentage of what the film makes. He also owns the copyright to his facial scan. So any toy that's sold that has his facial scan, he makes money off of that. So I can see why they would do that, because they would want to keep that much money. Because I guarantee you, he's making over $100 million. Just to give a very small estimate, he's making over $100 million from residuals and contract.
I have no doubt.
Yeah, and then so I can see why they would want to make a black girl who has an afro puff that can all of a sudden fit it inside of that little tiny helmet. The new Iron Man. But
Yes.
why do that? And I don't. This is the most
It's
baffling
clear
stuff.
how it fits, though, J Money. Science. Okay,
Science.
she likes science, and that's why she
Yes.
did it. That was the first thing she did.
Of course. Uh, of course, the scientific genius
She doesn't want to mess
character,
up her hair. Come on.
unbelievable. And I think in terms of the royalty problem, I feel like that was probably a major factor with all the Star Wars garbage that happened. It's a little off topic, but I do think that George Lucas still got some royalty money from those legacy
Yes.
characters and
Yeah.
stuff. So
From
it was
my,
of paramount importance to Disney to try and kill them off and ruin them as quickly as possible. And their mistake was thinking that they could easily pawn off some new characters just because it was Star Wars and they'd be just as successful. And didn't happen. You
I
know?
feel like if they just wrote those characters off instead of mishandling them the way they did, if you could just write off Luke Skywalker, write him off screen, you know, people would have been like, oh, that's kind of disappointing, but we got one last look at him, whatever, who's the next guy taking his place? And instead of, and we're just going to take this character that you like, and yeah, we're just going to beat him.
I agree. Yeah. I would rather them have just not touched
Yeah.
any of that stuff, just made a completely new Star Wars, new characters, new storyline. I mean, I would have preferred that over what we got, you know.
My understanding of the Star Wars situation was that Lucas retained 25% of the image rights of all of his original characters.
Right.
So every time they made an appearance, he was getting a cut.
Did you see that video where Iger and Lucas they did that little 7 or 12 minute interview, and Iger sitting there lying to Lucas's face about how they're going to keep with the lore and from the very first movie. I mean, what is it? Rogue One was glorious. I like that film, but for the very first canon film, they stabbed him right in the back. They stabbed him right in the back.
Well, he'd already written treatments, hadn't they? And that's the thing that baffled me about it. That when they bought the whole thing, the treatments had been done. He'd already essentially written the fucking films.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, what happened? Disney came in and looked at the treatments and went, "Oh, well, that doesn't push the agenda that we want to push, so we're going to have to change it all."
Exactly. So I had a thought about, you know, and this goes back to trying to get comic books into the cultural landscape, especially at a young age. You know, if I was Marvel, if I had the resources and network of a company like Marvel, Disney, I would try to put together some kind of really innovative, fun curriculum package for like creating a comic book for young students in school. You know, schools are hungry for stuff that's already pre-made for them that they can just, you know, use in the classroom. And I think a like comic book creation little mini curriculum that gets, you know, kids into creating their own comic book. I think that would go along. Imagine if all across the country, every kid kind of had that kind of interaction with producing their own comic book. That could produce a whole new generation of fans. And I was just curious what you guys thought about something like that.
My immediate response,
I believe they could do that.
I believe they should.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Captain.
My immediate response to that is, you know, that our system is different over here. So we don't go from school to university, or college as you call it. We go from school at 16 to college to 18 and then to university. So the way our system works here is when you hit 14, we have a thing called GCSEs, and you basically have to pick electives. You're given a selection. You have to choose from those of the ones you wish to do to further advance the things that you're interested in. But ever since the 80s, art as a subject has been slowly but surely being pushed out of schools because it doesn't serve a particular political agenda. Because as we all know, artists are outside the social mainstream political systems, because they don't want to engage in any of that sort of stuff. Same with physical education. Physical education since the 90s has been slowly and surely taken out of the curriculum and is generally only offered as extra curriculum activities after school.
Yeah, that's true.
So a lot of kids now, particularly up to the age of 16, unless they are nailed on that they want to work in some form with art, then when they make choices for the GCSEs, they can ignore the things that people want them to do because they've already made their mind up. Whereas a lot of the kids now who might still enjoy art, they just don't know what they want to do at the age of 16. So when they come to make those choices here, they automatically put art against, say, doing all three sciences. You can
Right.
you can either study science or you can study physics, biology, chemistry. You can do one of the other.
So I'll give you.
That's interesting.
So what they do is when it comes to art, they go, right, you can do art or you can do all three sciences. But bear in mind, if you study all three sciences and you're even mildly good at them, you've got a much higher success rate of getting a half decent job with a decent salary than you do if you study art.
Sure. I mean, I'm thinking more like much earlier. I'm talking like
Well, I'll throw
third,
in some
third,
examples.
fourth.
I'll throw in some- Go ahead.
What's that?
Sorry, Rob. That was my fault.
No, go ahead.
Well, Rod, do you have kids?
I do not.
Okay, well, so I have a 15-year-old daughter who's very artistic, and I actually live in Alabama. I live right next to Auburn/Opelika, and not only are so everyone likes to think Alabama is backwoods, but they're really not. Alabama, not only are we the largest agricultural school-based system here, like the farmers, student associations, and all those things, but we're also very sports savvy. Like I sent my daughter to a private school down here. It's called Glenwood Private School, and that's essentially a school that breeds sports, especially football, college football, because you got Roll Tide and you got Auburn University. So you have they have literally Viking warriors in high school with the size of these students. I'm such a tiny man compared to these 15-year-olds. But the art departments are actually, so in a lot of states, they actually lowered the budgets for all of these schools, whereas in Auburn, not only is it much harder to get an education here because the system is actually very stringent. Like one of the reasons why we rate so low in the grading overall into all of the United States is because of how hard the fucking schools are down here. But the art departments, they actually get a buttload of money. They are completely they always have something to do. My daughter's done woodworking. She's done man. So luckily what Captain Fuckhead was saying, what is happening up there is not happening down here. Now they may make you think that art is being destroyed in schools, because it is in some.
It certainly
lower
is,
half
for
from,
sure.
Essentially, yeah, and they do it on purpose. But the art departments down here are actually glorious, because my daughter actually likes architecture as well, like blueprinting, and hopefully soon we can get her in some AutoCAD or some. Or rather, when she gets into a higher grade, she can go into a Votech school and get good at AutoCAD. But like I was saying earlier, when I first got in the chat, my daughter is a fantastic colorist, and she, if she can do something with that, the schools down here in the South are quite nice. They are very, very quite nice.
That's cool. I mean, when I was, kind of just pondering this, getting something like a comic book curriculum kind of component into a classroom, I'm thinking more like, 4th, 5th grade, lower down, before, kids are making kind of decisions about what they want to do with their future. Just an early introduction, maybe even younger, just a really early
check there, Rob.
What's that?
Can I get an age check? Because I have no idea what 4th or 5th grade is.
Oh, let's say like 10, 11.
All right, okay.
Yeah, preteen, right at teen.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to, just to get them, and this was the motivation end is from like Marvel, from like a company that wants to produce a next generation of fans. And if they do all the work to create this really engaging packet for schools, and if they do all that legwork and give something to teachers that they can easily, they just go, step by step, go through the process, and kids get to create their own little comic books. This, I feel like it could be just a great introduction to comics and creating something. Kids love to create, and it would give them a taste for that storytelling medium. That we just got to get it introduced into young people's lives at an earlier time. Instead of people like discovering it later in life. However people discover this shit.
Come down to the South, you'll get proper education.
It's also one of those things where you have to, if you want to introduce that and use that type of tool, you also have to introduce it pretty young. Because if you try to give a teenager that, they're just going to hate it just because the teacher's giving them this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. That's what I mean. It has to be at a young enough age where the kids are still just like, yay, I'm in school and this is fun, kind of thing. Even if that even exists anymore.
You need to get people to just pass this stuff down. Like, I started reading comics because my dad would talk about comics and he had comics, so I read them. And then I got a part-time job and I was able to buy comics. My brother would start reading my comics, right? Because it was what his older brother was doing. And he's like, oh, dude, if my brother's doing it, it should be cool. So he would read the same books that I was reading. And then he would go and talk about some stuff to his friends and stuff like that. If you don't have that kind of like chain going, you need a little bit of a community. Like, you can't just have an isolated, like, oh, this one kid really likes to draw the comic book. He's going to have a much harder time being more and more invested in that community when there's not anybody around interested.
Yeah.
I know I brought sports up earlier, but one of the things that, and I'm a big NFL fan. I like the old American football, even though it's not fucking football. Name it after fucking rugby. Jesus Christ. So yeah, because it's a variation of rugby league, but I don't know if you all know rugby. I know you need rugby union, but yeah, it's a variation of rugby league. But what I admire about the education system in the States is your collegiate system. I think that's a fantastic thing to do with sports, because you're guaranteeing that all your sports stars actually have some sort of education before they even get anywhere near a professional league. And I think that's a great idea. I love the drafting system. And that, to me, I don't understand how there isn't something like that for the arts in the US.
Agreed. Yeah.
Straight through the education system, and there you go through, and then bang, then you basically what, 22 years old, 23 years old, Marvel might just go, yeah, could you come in to work with us, mate? Come on.
That would be so killer. I wish, education, to me, it's so nonsensical that we're not given the opportunity at some point to make. I think we should be able to make at a pretty young age. If you want to be a college type student, like if you want to go that path. But if you don't, if you want to go into a trade, if you have that mindset, the earlier you get started on that, the bigger your advantage is going to be. And you kind of just know, I think, at a fairly young age what type of person you are. But in the States, it's like everyone go to college. That's all that you just have to go to college. And if you want to do a trade, you're on your own. Figure that shit out on your own time. They
look down at you. Like where I'm at, they look down at you if you wanted to go to do anything that wasn't college. Oh, you mean you're not going to college?
Exactly.
Do you want to do something with your life?
One of the problems, I think, as well, I think it relates. In fact, I'm pretty certain it relates to comics. So if you look at the publishing industry, and we'll come to the art world in a second, but if you look at the publishing industry, the clue is in the title. It's called the publishing industry. The writers, the authors, are not part of the publishing industry. The publishing industry is made up of editors. It's made up of publishing houses. It's made up of the customers. It's not the creators.
Right.
And the art world is exactly the same thing. So if you go and speak to an artist and ask them if they're part of the art world, their immediate response, because they're an artist, is go, no, fuck off. Nothing to do with them. And you say why, and they'll tell you exactly why. They'll go, the art world is nothing more than galleries and critics.
Yes.
And we don't have time. We need them, but we don't have time for either of them. We don't like them.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you could then take And the thing I admire most about your collegiate sports system is the fact that the professional league is played, what is it, Thursday, Sundays? Is that right?
For
Thursday,
football,
Sundays, Mondays sometimes? Yeah.
Monday night
But
football. You have like what, Saturday night games, Thursday night games,
but the Saturday night
Sunday
games,
games.
I believe, are college football, aren't they? And then
Yeah, I
Friday
think
night's
so.
high school. So
Yeah.
what you're doing is you're making a show out of the whole thing. You're
Yes.
saying it's not just about the professional leagues. This is about watching kids from high school become the next Aaron Rodgers. You
Right.
get to watch that entire journey. If you could set something up like that for the arts, even the draft. The draft every year, it's a fucking weekly show. Like it's a every
That would be
year
so
week.
awesome.
If you could do
What-
that for the arts, that'd be incredible.
I
So
love that idea, man. Damn.
what if you like go to, we have a college, like college A. College A, they design a superhero, let's, Captain whatever. So they
Fuckhead.
would want to Captain Fuckhead. Yeah, they do their own Captain Fuckhead comic. They want to go to the different high schools and poach the skills, and then they want to sell that book and turn that book into a money grab, kind of like college football is, And I think that'd be a good approach, and I think that'd be the only way to kind of make them want to. But you have to allow those students to start making money, because I have a few friends that went to art schools, and how they made their money was that they did side gigs outside of school. So they're talented people, but he would sit there and like he had friends that were trying to do bands, and he was going through all these film classes, and he's like, "Oh, dude, yeah, for a couple $100, I'll go shoot your stuff. I don't care." And they got a guy who knows his shit for almost nothing because he's just a poor college student. You could turn that into something, and it builds their resumes as well as giving them more experience and more skills. So it's not horrible, but that'd be a good way to go.
But you're also turning it into a show. You are going.
True.
If you're doing that,
Yes.
what you're doing is you're ingraining it into the public consciousness. You are
Yes.
saying this is a fucking thing, by the way. You should be paying
Right.
attention to this.
And then,
Right.
of course, that's going to it's going to draw more people to it. You've got this stigma on artists, at least in the States, where it's really like the worst thing that could happen to you if you're a parent is your kid coming to you and saying, "I want to be an artist," right? It's
Or a
like this.
lesbian.
Oh man,
you know,
that's
you're
not
not-
even that bad anymore compared to artists.
You're going to suffer your whole life as an
Yeah.
artist. You're not going to have stability and all that. But if it, again, like you're saying, I love this idea of turning it into this thing that's, it really attracts attention. It entertains. It turns people into rock stars and really fuels something. I love it, man.
It's just expanding on the whole idea of Comic Cons.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just saying, you know what, this is worth your fucking time, and that's all
That's
it takes.
really cool.
To ingrain anything into society. All it takes is enough people to say this is worth your fucking time enough fucking times, and the whole thing with the Nazis. If you say it loud enough, shout it loud enough and often enough, it becomes truth, whether it is or not.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And it's so interesting to me that almost every topic that we try to delve into on the show, to really come up with any kind of actual solutions or that might work, or it seems like there's always this much bigger picture societal cultural thing that has to be dealt with. And it seems like, well, what does that have to do with comics? But it's like, I don't think you can fix something like nobody reading comic books without fixing these bigger picture problems. It's all interconnected,
And especially now, where you look at what's happening with technology, and you look at the way that life is moving at such a pace at the moment, and especially with, I'm not going to say it, a bottle of lager and a slice of lime, with all that happening, you look at so the movement of you talk about the movement of technology. There's a pizza shop in Seattle at the moment that is apart from the transferring of goods from a truck to the place where the goods need to be, which is done by one human. There's a pizza shop that is entirely automated. You can't go in and buy stuff. You order it online, and they are currently, so everything's made by bots. It's the Burger King broiler system, where because of the way they basically use a system like that, where there's a bot makes the dough gets stretched, and it spits all the shit on it, and then it goes through, comes out, goes straight into a box, and at the moment it goes straight into a drone delivered.
Wow.
With the way that's going, and that's going to, automation like that's going to become into mass society very, very quickly because of Corona. I mean the beer before you start. You drink the beer.
Right.
You're going to find a lot of people out of work very, very quickly. So people are going to have to generate revenue streams. Yeah,
Sure.
how do you do that? The way you generate revenue streams these days is all online. It's all about data.
Yeah.
Therefore, we are in a prime position. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Comicsgate is leading the way for creator-led industries.
Absolutely.
If you don't know how to fucking code, but you can fucking draw, make a fucking comic.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, that's that automation thing. As you were, speaking to that, and and this is the context of, delivering a pizza to someone. But in my mind, I'm thinking, imagine, print on demand, books and comics, all automated. You order the book online, and it literally gets, printed and made, packaged and droned over to you. Like, it's all print on demand.
Well, Amazon kind of does that now already.
They do. I've sold stuff through print on demand through it got worse and worse and worse. Of course, they made it less and less desirable to do it. You just can't really. It's really tough to make money at it, is what I'm saying. But it definitely. Yeah. I was impressed with the quality was decent. It was efficient. You didn't have to worry about any of the production stuff. You just got everything ready, and they handled everything for you.
Well, that's how Adam does. Adam, I'll bring him up again. The Postman does College of the Dead. He does it through Lulu. It's all print on demand.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
They just to let you know, they're also doing what you're saying about taking away jobs. They do that with grocery stores too.
Yeah, because Amazon in New York have got one, haven't they? You enter the store by flashing your. They give you some sort of code off of your device. It registers who you are. You go in, you buy shit, and as you scan it and put it in your basket, it comes out your Amazon account immediately. You just scan and walk back out the door again.
Oh man!
When I lived in Germany, you used to be able to pick up a scan gun, and as you're going through the store, you're picking up the items. You scan it as you put it in the cart, and you just turn in the scan gun, and it charges you. And they pretty much have one person who looks at your cart like at Costco and marks your receipt. There you go.
They've gone even further than that. So what they do, if you ever heard of Encash or Wabu, they're both cryptocurrencies, but you got Japan and India, specifically Wabu, which is it's a grocery store token coin. They have grocery stores where there are no employees whatsoever. You walk in, the system already knows who you are, and you put stuff into your shopping cart, and as soon as you put it into your shopping cart, the system knows that you put it into your shopping cart, and then you literally just walk out. And there's no one to stop you. There's no, I mean, of course, I'm sure they have an employee, so in case someone steals something, you can. But you get what I'm saying. And they also have Encash. And Encash, not only does Encash also work with grocery stores, but they're also a security personnel company as well. So the technology is a lot farther than we think it is. And they're, especially like with the up north, you actually have autonomous semi trucks. So you have semi trucks on those really long rural routes that drive themselves and deliver the equipment. And then they'll get reloaded wherever they're at a depot station, and then they will drive back to their home base. And there's not a single human interaction.
Yeah.
If you think about, you bring up automated trucks. If you think about American logistics, so if you think about trucks, trains, taxis, all that stuff, you look at what's happening with driverless cars alone. I mean, you could buy the possibility you could even buy a Tesla. It'd be made and tested by automation, and it could deliver itself to your door.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's getting insane. It feels like we're moving toward a time where all the jobs people have are just like kind of just to keep people busy. Like they're not really needed or necessary. They're just like they're creating something for people to do, and it doesn't really serve any purpose, but you better be damn serious about doing it.
But if you look at the American economy, I'm sure the last time I looked at this, 15%, I think 12 to 15% of the employed people in the United States of America are some sort of logistical people. They do driving basically.
Yeah.
And if you could wipe those jobs out overnight.
It just doesn't. I feel like they could have done a lot more automation than they have already, but
Yeah.
it is literally being held at arm's length for this very reason. It would create chaos.
Yeah.
Well,
the
did you
only
listen to
reason
what-
why it's not there is because it would almost destroy your government system.
Yeah.
Well, did you listen to what Elon Musk said about all this? So Elon Musk had an executive that had been with him since the beginning of him starting Tesla and SpaceX, and he actually got caught doing corporate espionage. And what he was doing is he would go to certain computer systems in the facilities that made his machines, or the machines that made his product, and he was changing the slightest of code. And so the automated machines would like they would tack weld something incorrectly on thousands of products that they were making for that day. And he actually did an interview about how moving forward he's actually going to use less automation because automation is actually worse. And if you could find the interview where he talks about it, but he had the Fed walk in on him. And they caught the guy red-handed, like Mr. Robot or something, where they caught him doing corporate espionage. They caught him in the act, and he had been with Elon since day one. But they completely set him up. They were messing up his assembly lines in just the most minute ways. But if you change the system just enough in enough areas, you'll fuck the whole.
I mean, I don't think many people would argue that automation results in a better product. You know, I don't think that's really ever true. I don't know if that's ever been the case.
I agree. I agree.
It'll be rough because I remember I was a grocery store worker when they started to do self-checkout, and I remember the huge pushback from that. People didn't want to do it. People didn't like it. And against what I thought at the time, I thought the hours were going to get cut. I saw a bit of an increase because not only did we have to man the self-checkout, but we also had to do tech support. So I actually got a job doing tech support for them because I all the hours were there. I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'll go learn how to fix this machine, whatever. And I would go around all the stores fixing their broken stuff. But you'd go in there and you'd see the self-checkout would be almost empty, and they'd be calling in checkers because nobody wanted to use them. And so you have to be careful with your automation because sometimes people expect a service.
Yeah.
I mean, now with the COVID stuff, I mean, now with the Sharona stuff, they that might change. But
yeah, and again, it's like, I think this connects back to what we're saying about you've got people like us who are still in love with that printed comic book, and that's a big part of what we love about it. And then it's hard for us to imagine a younger generation that doesn't care about it being printed or holding it. That they'd be completely fine with it being digital. It kind of, but you know, I think younger people, when it comes to like self-checkout and automation, they were introduced to it right from the beginning, so it's natural to them. It's not even something they have to think about. So, you know, I think we do have to be prepared that printed comics are probably on the path to being a very niche, kind of like vinyl records. You know, that came up yesterday, but it's like, it doesn't mean that people can't be very successful at it. Like Ethan Van Sciver, who, you know, I forgot to give a shout out to. The guy just rock and rolled it.
Yeah.
800, you know, he went over 850,000 before it went into in demand. Just blew it out of the water.
Vestige also went. I think they hit 7 figures last night.
Oh yeah, they went over 100K, and it's like, it doesn't mean that quite a few people will not be able to have success in the printed comic book market. But is it ever going to be like a Is America ever going to grow it into something where 10-15% of the population is reading printed comics? I don't know if that's possible without a massive effort to shift the culture at a young age. You know,
I hold out more hope than you, I think, on that, Rob, because of things like automation coming in, and the lack of what could be perceived to be a future lack of human interaction, because we wouldn't need to interact with other human beings anymore. I think eventually you'll end up finding some sort of pushback, and people will call out for not just human interaction, but actual human related interaction, whether that's actually speaking to an actual physical person or reading something that is actual physical that somebody has created. I think one of the things that humans have always done is create. It's the reason why we have language. It's the reason why we have art. We create and we evolve. And I think what's going to happen when a lot of this technology finally comes into the mainstream, and it's just round the corner now. So I think what will end up happening is at some point people are going to go, I want a thing. Like I'm fed up of just everything being attached to this little machine I've got. I want a thing. I just want one thing. And then I think that hopefully I see that as growing. And like I say, creator-led industry, I think can grow excessively as long as it's treated correctly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I do agree with that.
That's the other thing that has to be stuck in there. It needs to be a respectable industry.
Yeah.
I do agree that there will be pushback. There will be people who, kind of rebel and reject everything being on the screen, and they want a more tactile experience. I just don't know if that. I feel like that is going to be a rebellion, and usually the rebellion is a little bit on the fringe. It's a niche. It's a smaller percentage of people rather than a majority of people. But we'll see.
You say that, but look at what happened at in Boston and the Tea Party. Look at what happened at the French Revolution. These things they might start small, but they grow. And the more people get to see things. I mean, imagine you go around to somebody's house who you haven't seen for 10 years. You're both living in a massive tech world, and you go into his house and you see a Jackson Pollock hanging on the wall. Mm. Your immediate response, even if you don't like Pollock, you're gonna be, "What the fuck is this thing?" Like,
right?
Cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You talking about the new art?
Hey?
You talking about new art?
No, I'm just talking about art in general. It's just I'm a big fan of Jackson Pollock, so he just came to my brain straight away.
Yeah, I think he's just saying if you hadn't encountered a physical piece of art like that what the experience of that would be like, whoa, what is this thing? Mm-hmm. And how do I get more of it? And you're saying like with this oversaturation of screens that eventually, the appeal of someone holding something in print, it could like create a renaissance, I guess is what mm-hmm. you're saying.
Yep.
Right.
Quite easily.
Yeah. I get that. It's entirely possible, but I do think, work has to be done to get comic books into the cultural mindset at a young age. These things, they have to be part of the culture. They have to be more accepted, not looked down upon, introduce creating comics to kids at an earlier age, however that can be achieved. And I love this whole idea of, giving people the opportunity to choose the art path as like this kind of rock star path, like sports. I really love that part of this discussion. That's a great idea.
Well, it should be. Cool. I mean, if you look at even like I was saying, there's a difference between being an artist and being part of the art world. Even if you go back to what was happening in Paris in the early 1900s to the 1920s, and you look at the cafe culture that they had going on there, that's where you bought art. That's where normal people got access to artists.
Yeah, right.
You had the art world, which was all the galleries, but you
Yeah.
had the cafe culture where normal people got to go to the art, got to actually interact with the artists because the artists were fucking in the cafes.
Yeah.
And that's where they used to hang out, the cafes and the bars. That can easily be achieved again. It's not a difficult thing to do. The trick is that back then artists always struggled. Like there's very rarely any artist ever made it when they were alive.
Sure.
But we can change that because popular culture's a different kettle of fish. If you're working in comics, everybody knows who fucking Stan Lee is. Yes, I know he's dead now, but everybody knows who Rob Liefeld is, and he can't draw feet. That's because he's a fucking rock star.
Right.
We can make that happen again, and the best way to do that, as far as I can see, is grow Comicsgate.
I agree, and like CG Jumpstart, I think it's just around the corner. The magazine. That's kind of emulating that Wizard magazine vibe. And again, a big part of that was turning comic book creators into rock stars. To give it that energy. And I really love that CG Jumpstart is happening. I think it's a great idea.
It's just a question of how many hands can you get it into.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to do really well. They've been building anticipation for it for a long time. A lot of CG talent is in there, which means everyone that's got a stake in it, everyone who has a piece of art or an article, they're going to be out there pushing it, promoting it. I think there's a lot of energy behind it. I think EVS is behind it. So I feel like it's going to get out to thousands of people, for sure.
Yeah, this is a fantastic movement.
Yeah.
We need to make it more than a movement, though. That's the next step. Because I know people have talked about Comicsgate as an industry. It's not a fucking industry. It's nowhere near an industry. It's barely a cottage industry at this point. But it's got potential. That's the thing.
It does.
You've got huge potential.
I think
we need to try and make that happen.
I think at the beginning of the year, or just before the year started, there was kind of this $10 million goal for the year. But I think people forget that was about getting 1% of the market share of the total comics market share. And just to put that in perspective, Image Comics only has like 8%, okay? And they're the third largest publisher. So Comicsgate taking 1% is a huge deal. And with everything that's happened, with the comic sales in mainstream completely at a standstill for this stretch, I think even if we don't hit 10 million, I think we have a very, very strong chance to get 1% or even more of this year's share, That's exciting.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that we're going to watch as Comicsgate slowly start eroding more and more of that, especially as we get more and more people that kind of want to, or kind of eyeballing it and pop over.
Yeah, for sure.
And the other thing with that, just to bring it back to what we were talking about the other day when we were talking about Sean.
Oh yeah,
Mr. Murphy. Just him alone, because we were saying, what's his motivation? Why is he going to Indiegogo? Just him alone having a campaign on Indiegogo, whether it's Comicsgate or not, is irrelevant. What it's doing is it's putting eyes on the Indiegogo, and that is where we do our thing. So just having him with their thing on Indiegogo is massive in itself, because it's automatically other people are going to see other things.
You're right. Yeah. For some reason, I hadn't really thought about that aspect, but you're absolutely right.
Just now, which is why I had to get it out of my head.
That's a really good point.
Yeah,
it's a really good point, and I think he did launch today. I think it's live right now.
If it matters, his book made 15,000 during your stream, even though you didn't talk about it.
Oh, of course.
I mean, your stream just moves the needle. No matter, we don't need to mention him until the last little bit.
Exactly.
And
it's like Midday Repartee is on. People get out their wallets. They start buying comic books. That's how this show works. It was. I had this really funny idea last night when EVS was. He was starting up his closeout stream, and he wanted to beat the evil. Right. At this point, he was still under 800,000, I think. And so I had this idea, like, I'm going to start a stream and call it the Real Wrecked Planet Closeout Stream. And I'm going to, as the project was just raking in cash, I was going to be like, dude, EVS is doing his best over there, but, we're picking up the slack because, that the poor guy just can't get it done. So we're doing it for him. But the guy hit his goal so fast. By the time I was ready to do it, he had already done it. I'm like, damn you. Damn you.
And also, if you look under Sean Gordon Murphy's Indiegogo, if you scroll all the way down,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Ethan campaign is at the bottom of the page.
There you go.
Wow.
Just what.
See, there you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to next week for sure. I'm not sure which day. We should definitely check in with his campaign, see how it's going, kind of break down what he's doing with it. I
It's-
definitely want to do that.
It's not impressive. Like the numbers are impressive, but the page is not impressive.
I caught a glimpse of it. I think Eric Weathers went into it a little bit today on his stream, and yeah, it didn't look too good. So I want to talk about. I think he's going to do really well. He's probably going to do 200K like without too much difficulty. But imagine if he had done it right.
Hmm.
You know, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'm thinking right now he's selling on his name alone. Imagine
Yeah.
if he also made it look like this is the book.
Yeah,
You know,
and
imagine
built
if
that
he got
excitement.
the cyberpunk treatment.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
Well, I mean, bless him. He's new. We've got to give him a little bit of a break.
Oh yeah. Well, he has
Well, it's
done a
his third
couple.
project.
He's done crowdfunding before. You know, I think if you have success with kind of a baseline level of effort, you probably don't feel all that motivated to put in 1,000% when all you have to do is 20% effort.
Look what
You know.
they, look what Zay just said. I forgot that.
Oh.
And $200 for a Skype call. Get out of here. Get out of here.
Oh, that was ridiculous. And it's like I think his stretch goals are actually things that unlock that you then have to buy.
Oh,
Yeah,
If I'm not
hardcover
mistaken.
edition. Um,
So like, dude, you don't understand what's happening here, dude. You don't get it.
Yeah.
So we got you. We shelled out cash. We got you to a stretch goal. What's our reward? Well, you can buy something else, fucker.
yeah.
anyway.
No, that's not crowdfunding. Come on, guys. But he's gonna succeed either way. It could be so much bigger if he had really put in the work to understand crowdfunding. If he had built more anticipation, build up his YouTube channel a little bit, it could be so huge. But it is what it is. We'll get into it next week for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we had a really cool conversation. It went to some interesting places, especially with education, some ideas in that arena. I enjoyed it. Captain Fuckhead, anything you wanna push out into the world?
Yeah, Rot and Glory, #2024. Yeah, come and you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on YouTube. I'm at Captain Fuckhead. There is no you in me, it's just FCK. On Monday night, I'm going to do a new show. It's a pilot for a new show where what I'm doing is I'm inviting people that I already know at this point, so basically CG UK, to come on and be fans and shill books that they're most anticipated and they're fuck's sake, the books that they're most looking forward to.
Yeah.
Never ask a dyslexic to come up with a complicated sentence. So it's a little bit different. So I'm hoping that people will come on, and I don't necessarily want it to be too long, maybe half an hour to an hour, but
Yeah.
I'm hoping to maybe extrapolate that into a series of shows on Monday nights, where I invite as many fans who want to come on and shill books.
That's cool.
Come and do it, 'cause
And I know, yeah, you had posted something along these lines, I think, to test the waters a little on Twitter, and it really got a pretty huge response. So I'm
It did,
excited
yeah.
about this.
Yeah, I like a shilling show. I mean, my other show's a shilling show, but I don't tend to shill too much.
Right.
But I kind of get a bit bored of those shows where YouTubers basically invite creators on and then tell them to dance, monkey, dance.
Yeah,
think it's a
and
bit,
they kind of did run through the whole campaign and the elevator pitch and all. It's like how yeah,
I think it gets
It
boring
can.
for creators and it gets boring for fans. And I think
sure.
I think the Comicsgate has always been about the fans, and so I want them to have their voice. And
It's a good idea, man.
they
I
can
like
come
it.
and
So
shout at me and
that's
tell me to shut up if they want. I don't care. They can just shill a book.
that's going down Monday nights, folks.
Monday,
So
that'll be 10 p.m. GMT. That's real time for anyone who doesn't know.
That's not real
5 p.m. EST.
Jay Money, you got any closing words for us?
Yeah, two cool things. Politics based.
For a second there, I thought you were saying toot toot.
So,
Sorry.
so something that's very cool that happened today. The Department of Defense just put a 4-star general in charge of the CDC, the NIH, and the FDA. So now the CDC, FDA, and the NIH, which is the National Institute of Health, is now under the control of a 4-star general who works for Mike Milley, who is the leader of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Mark Esper, who is the leader of the Department of Defense. So one, that's pretty fucking crazy. And two, the Space Force flag got revealed today, and y'all should Google it because it looks pretty fucking dope.
Space Force, yes, indeed.
Yeah, dude,
All
that
right.
shit looks
No,
cool
I
as
will
hell.
check that out. That looks. I'd like to see that for sure.
Every
Mitchell.
Time
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I just want to say, every time
Oh,
I hear Space Force, all I can think of is was the Trey Parker film, Team America.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, aren't they already? Isn't there a movie in the works already with like Steve Carell or something? Space Force.
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks humorous. It looks humorous.
I love the logo, like it's Star Trek through and through.
It is.
Just, yeah,
It is Star Trek.
Oh man. Mitchell, do you have anything you'd like to close us out with?
Yeah, after you guys watch Captain Fuckhead's show, go over to Inkspot's channel. F Monday is going to be on in a couple
That
hours.
is
after that, I
correct.
think. And
Yes.
also, Zaid Comics' new book is Lost Pages, and he's got a mailing list we linked to a little bit earlier too for it, and it looks just awesome. If you click on it, you look at it, you see some of the artwork there. It's amazing. These guys deliver.
Yes.
They come great packaged. I mean,
So good.
awesome.
Magic Cop is just
Oh,
such
man.
a fun ride. I love it. It really one of the more fun books I've received so far. So Zaid Comics is rocking it. Comicsgate is rocking it, everybody. I want to thank the chat for being here. Hail, and I guess for this show we'll see you Monday.
Yeah.
Everybody.
see you later.
See ya.